Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks.
Just waiting to get the thumbs up that we're on recording. Thank you. So, good afternoon and welcome to our council meeting today. Just a reminder for those that are here for mobiles, if you have them switched off, as it can interfere with our recording. And also welcome to those that are listening on air or on air, anyway, listening online. And we thank you for joining the meeting and we look forward to having a productive meeting today. Please be seated. Thank you very much. Just on opening the meeting, I have one apology from Councillor Stosinczek for today. Mayoral acknowledgements. I do want to just mention that it was a pleasure to be able, on behalf of the Rotary Club of Youngtown, to get a certificate regarding the Soggy Bottom Regatta of 2020. That was a very special occasion, wasn't it, Deputy Mayor? We had a lovely time, but it's, they were very thankful and they want to pass on their thanks to Council. One, that we got involved, but also, more importantly, that Luke, and pass that on from the comms team for Luke's involvement in helping promote the event, did a fantastic job. They were really appreciative of that, but also of our graduates that helped. I'm appreciative of that, helped us build the craft. It was a craft, it was quite special. So that was Isaac, Dylan and Joseph, and also to a lot of our other staff that helped, especially when they needed cardboard, etc. They really went out of their way so we could pass throughout the organisation, perhaps CEO. Appreciation from the Rotary Club of Youngtown for all the support that they gave for that event this last year. And unfortunately, it won't be going ahead next year. They've decided to not really postpone, but they're aiming for 2020 to be a bigger and better event. So that's just the mayoral acknowledgement for today. Declaration of interest? No declaration of interest. Confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of October, moved by Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Harris. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is all councillors present. That is carried. Minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 22nd of October as well. Somebody happy to move that? Councillor McKenzie, seconded Councillor Spencer. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Councillor Dakin, are you for? Yep, that's all councillors present. That is carried. Thank you. I think that's the two that I had to do for this one. No deputations, no petitions, no community reports, public question time. Questions from the previous meeting are there with the responses. Any public questions for today? No public questions. We'll continue to move on then. So now, under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act, Council acts as a planning authority in regard to item included under agenda item number 9, Planning Authority. So item 9.1. I don't think we have any speakers for this item, so anyone happy to move the motion? Councillor Finlay, seconded Councillor McKenzie. Just to speak to Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mayor. Despite there being a number of items of discretion that are set out in our report, subject to reading the report, the representations and the attachments being on site, it does seem that the development is reasonable for the site. There have been a number of considerations in regards to the no longer existing heritage overlay that was on a previous title. Now that this new title has been considered, we did do an assessment of that in any case. It is an area that is seeing redevelopment and new development, and I think given that it's way that it meets the requirements of the scheme, it will be a positive addition to the precinct.
Thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
I'd just like to note the significant diligence that's gone into the report in regards to the heritage matters, which I think have been very well explained, and certainly I think deals with a number of the issues that potentially were raised in relation to the potential project. As Councillor Finlay said, there are some discretions. They've been assessed, again in depth by the officer and given good reasons as to why those discretions are appropriate. So I'm satisfied that it meets the requirements of the planning.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Thanks, Mayor. I will be supporting this today. It complies, it's consistent. The only bit of an impact I've got is the visitor parking is not required. Maybe it should be, because it's a very narrow little street with no parking in it. I don't know if we can put something in the next, there's another place possibly going to happen next door. I think they should have visitor parking, because we went up there today, it was very hard to turn. I don't know if that can be done, changed in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Shane, would you want to? Oh, Shane's not here. Oh, she is. Do you want to answer at all?
No.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. And I rise to also support the development application. And I just want to make note, though, of the representations. I think that we all do appreciate the heritage value in Launceston, especially inner city Launceston. And this street in particular has various examples of buildings that look like they might go back to the 1880s or so, maybe earlier, as well as brick modern building 1940s California bungalow type building. So it is a mixed use area, and this will add to it. I can understand why people may feel as though, you know, a modern design is not appropriate, but at the same time, this is the type of infill that's happened around that area in Margaret Street, and opportunities like this are few and far between for vacant blocks in inner city Launceston, and people will maximise those opportunities. So I just wanted to voice that those concerns that people have expressed are heard, and you know, and I would encourage people to always do that, but in this case it does you know, satisfy most of my concerns. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Finlay, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. Move on to Mayor's announcements. Can I first of all congratulate the Launceston Football Club on winning the grand final, despite being disappointed on the day, but that's a great effort for them to do that, and especially to win 4. I think the pleasing thing was 2 northern teams in there, so that was great for state football. But also it was on Sunday, just gone, it's great to go to the northern suburbs, to the permaculture design course that was run with funding from council, so they passed on their thanks very much to council, to the councillors and all of the staff for the support they've been given, but especially it was a fantastic day when I was there, the part that I was there for, and some really great ideas and initiatives coming forward in the community, so hopefully we'll see a few more of those, because not only were they for individuals in their own families, but also a few things for as a community, and there was an idea for the northern suburbs, a community up there, so I'm hoping that some of that will come to fruition in the not too distant future. So really great value for our funds, I think, in that case. So really great to be there. Also, I'd like to mention that I have, and I'm sure some of the other councillors have received some questions about Myrtle Park, and it's been something that we're all probably getting. So I just want to state quite clearly for on the record that the City of Launceston is planning to reopen Myrtle Park hopefully in December this year, and that's something that is pretty close to being definite. Council has closed Myrtle Park due to the federal government COVID-19 public control measures, and they're working through those have been. The proposed operational model for the camp site will go to Council for consideration, for us to consider on November the 12th. So that's the next meeting, so we'll be able to discuss it there at that meeting. And the ongoing management of the review is under review, continue for Myrtle Park. But obviously it's going to be, some of the facilities will not probably open as they were before, but there will be an opening in December and sometime in mid-November, subject to the November 12th meeting that we'll be holding. Bookings will be able to be made for Myrtle Park. So and it will be staffed along with, from council staff, with security patrols. So I want people to be aware of that, because we are getting a number of emails, and we can continue to answer those, and we'll probably do a release on that not the distant future, maybe today or tomorrow. So, and that's it from myself. Thank you. Councillor reports. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I rise to share 4 things with councillors. The first is one, in fact, that was listed in your schedule of announcements. I just wanted to make known to the public and councillors who were not there the significant upgrade at the Student Works facility with regard to their commercial kitchen upgrade, with thanks to funds that were contributed from the WD Booth Estate and the Tas Community Fund, as well as their own resource. Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Spencer, myself and the Mayor were there to see the fruits of their labour come to fruition and to assist, I guess, in the educational opportunities for members of our Launceston community. It was fantastic to be present with so many members of our community, in fact, who were there cheering on the students and the board, and Sean, the principal, there. So just wanted to further highlight that, Mayor. The other thing I wanted to mention was the citizenship ceremony that the Mayor proceeded over earlier this week. Gee, we were fortunate to have more than 20 new citizens become part of our community, and it's always amazing to see the diversity and the happiness that comes from those citizens' stories. and to know that for some of them the journey to get to that point where they are officially sworn in as citizens is such a heroic one in many instances. So it was wonderful, Mayor, to see you there, you know, and the pride that comes from those young people and the not so young. Having a photo with the Mayor following that journey on the day is pretty special. Theatrical events are starting to make a small comeback in our community. And on Friday evening just gone, Theatre North presented a wonderful grand evening of poetry at the Hotel Grand Chancellor. And it was just fabulous to have over 100 people who were permitted into that particular space to celebrate contemporary women poets recited by a diverse gathering of Launceston identities, poets, and in fact two of our councillors, Councillor Dawkins and Councillor Finlay, who both recited beautifully their poems. It was an indication by the sold-out attendance that it's an indication from the sold-out attendance that there is a will of the people to get back to cultural events that are safe, cultural events that celebrate the diverse and talented arts community that we have here in Launceston. So we look forward to more of those coming online. And in that vein, item 4 is to mention that Remade is happening this weekend at the Albert Hall. It's the 10th anniversary of the Interweave Association's Remade, and in true Interweave style, having received some council events funding, they are putting on an incredible presentation at the Albert Hall this Saturday at 2 p.m. and at 7:30 p.m. So if you are available and you haven't yet RSVP'd or you haven't yet purchased a ticket, I know that some are still available, and you never know who could be there dressed up in the spirit of the event. Isn't that right, Mr Mayor?
Thank you. Thank you. Any other councillor reports? Questions from councillors? Questions? Councillor Finlay?
Thank you, Mayor. I have just recently been asked this question, so I haven't put it on notice anywhere previously. But in response to COVID, we made a great decision, and I'm not sure whether we programmed it or it was the state government, to provide for the pedestrian crossings to be automated during the day. And it's had a really positive response. And a couple of people have asked me, when's it due to finish or is it ongoing? And if there was a review point for that, whether an extension up to the hospital, there's a large pedestrian up and down there, and it stops at a point, and people really appreciate not having to touch the buttons. So I'm not sure who's responsible for it, if there's a review period, and if there is, I imagine it's not that costly with the reprogramming, if it could be looked slightly extended and continued.
Thank you. I was going to say Director, General Manager, Shane?
It's a state growth initiative. The intent is it's in to stay. The reason why some it was implemented on some and not others, it was purely a matter of hardware and software, what was capable of supporting it. The intent would be that would be rolled out across the whole CBD. Yeah.
Councillor Mackenzie?
Thanks, Mayor. It just came to me just before council today. A member of the public approached me just in regards to the pedestrian crossing that's been put in up on the corner of High Street and Canning, and just made the comment to me that as cars are coming in a northerly direction, they're actually having to swerve around it to miss it. So I'm just wondering, is that a state growth or a council one, and B, whether anybody's been up to look at to make sure that it actually is a safe crossing?
That's one of our roads, but I haven't heard any complaints or issues about it, so we can follow it up.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer?
Thanks, Mayor. I had a phone call from someone the other day carrying on about the traffic at Informate, and I did tell him there was a problem up at with a water main. But since that new lights have gone in, I think the traffic has greatly improved, and my idea, blocking the right turns, is probably going to be even better. But I had a phone call from Adam Beachy the other day mentioning why can't we open up Gladdo Street off the new traffic lights? I don't know if we can put it to state roads or whatever, but that probably could help too.
Thank you. They'll take that on notice, but it wasn't just your idea. There's quite a few councillors that said it well before you were on council, by the way, Councillor Spencer. So.
It took a long time to do it. Thank you.
That's a different issue. Any other questions? No more questions? Thank you. 13.1, Tender Review Committee. Someone happy to move that? Councillor Cox, second to Councillor McKenzie. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Cox?
Just briefly, thanks, Mayor. The three items self-explanatory. Just to clarify the point on number one, the earthworks, there's been a few questions about when will the whole thing open up again. This stage is only for the earthworks. The Road Safety Centre will open at a later stage, but I know people get excited about school holidays and Christmas, so this is the beginning of it.
Thank you for that, Councillor McKenzie. Any other councillor wish to speak to it? 13.1. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. That is all councillors present. That is carried. Move on to 14.1, council workshops. Councillor Dawkins move. Second to Deputy Mayor. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Dawkins?
Yeah, just briefly. Obviously, the briefing sessions we receive at workshops are valuable to our council work, but I think one in particular in this instance, it's very useful for anybody listening to understand how this might work. So when we think about the facilities at Leaderdale, we received a number of representations from people saying we want an assessment of whether or not we receive what we should for our community. And of course, then we go out and do an assessment. We do an audit, and then we've got a really clear understanding of what it is the community has, and we can benchmark that against like communities. So we're still in the process. No decisions have been made, but we have now made a deep and clear assessment of what it is the community have got, and it will be up to infrastructure services and councillors to continue in that journey. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Mine is in a similar vein. I wanted to comment on the cultural strategy. Obviously, we're 90% complete with regard to the unveiling of our inaugural cultural strategy, and it was wonderful last week in that workshop to receive some of the results of the consultation and to make those minor changes that had been received during the consultation phase. General Manager Hurst and I, who were present at a number of those consultation events, General Manager Hurst committed to the revised changes going back to the members that we consulted with. So all being well, we really look forward now to getting on to the adoption of that cultural strategy as a result of the wonderful work that's happened so far.
Thank you for that. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Dawkins wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 16.1, the Car Villa Memorial Park. Move Councillor McKenzie, second to Councillor Soward. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor McKenzie?
Just briefly, I think it's just a good common sense decision. I guess there are people out in our community who are wishing to make some of these graves into private concerns now because they can afford it. This just increases the affordability and enables those families to sort of get their grave sites put back into private capacity without costing them an arm and a leg, so I support it.
Thank you. Councillor Soward?
Councillor McKenzie summed it up perfectly.
Thank you. Any other councillor wishes to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. Move on to 19.1, budget amendments. Move Councillor McKenzie, second to Councillor Soward. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor McKenzie?
All very well explained in the documentation.
Thank you. Councillor Soward. Deputy Mayor?
Just briefly, it's an opportune time to again thank the members of the QV Mag Arts Foundation for the money that they raised that will help with regard to the purchase of the item that is to be acquired.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? Can I put the motion then? Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. The motion is carried. 19.2, move Councillor McKenzie, seconded Deputy Mayor. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor McKenzie?
I do, Mayor, and as members are aware, I'm the council rep on Theatre North, so I don't have a conflict of interest. I have an interest, and I guess I support this notion. You know, the theatre world and the arts world in particular have been very hard hit by COVID, where they haven't been able to get into theatres around the country. And none quite as obvious as the one that we have in our own city with Theatre North, with the restrictions on numbers of people who are allowed to attend that theatre. The theatre's been dark pretty much right through since March. We were setting up for a very good year and a very busy year, and unfortunately had to suspend effectively everything that we were doing for a number of months. I've been heartened by the way our officers and our board have worked in relation to trying to manage our situation. We've tried to keep our arts community informed on what's going on in and around, and we've taken a real role in doing those sorts of things. The reality of it is it's cost us money. We've had support from the federal government through JobKeeper. We've had our continued support from council in regards to assisting us with community events. But the reality of it is biting, and it's biting deep. She's a lovely old lady, the Princess Theatre, but she costs money to keep open and to even keep shut. We found it's actually quite an expensive operation. The board, I think, have taken a very appropriate response in that they have actually funded losses through the last 6 months. The reality of it is we're going to run out of money at some stage into the near future, depending on capacity issues, and we'll work through that with council as we start to build up, and if we don't need to take all the money that's been put forward here today, we won't. But the reality of it is we probably will, because it's going to take some time for us to get capacity back into our theatres. My sense is that we are doing a good job, or the Theatre North is doing a good job in managing the theatre, albeit in a dark time. We're actually making sure everything that we can do, we are doing to make sure that the theatre is alive, and there are small performances that are actually happening. We had a fantastic public response to our theatre, where a public fundraise of $10,000 was made by Back to the Theatre concert a few weeks ago, which was fantastic, and it just showed the thirst for people coming back. And I think Councillor Gibson made comment about the thirst for people to want to get back involved with the arts, with the poetry last week. It was amazing to walk into that room and see so many people there. So it was fantastic. So we're keen to get back and get our theatre operational. The reality of it is, the moment our capacities do lift, it will still take some time for us to get performances back into our theatres. But I think this is very worthy to support today, and I certainly it has my full support.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I obviously am supportive of what is before us. I think it's really important to note that it's not the Theatre Royal, and thus there's not a direct line to government in terms of the way the Princess Theatre and the Earl Arts Centre, being our assets, manage and receive funding. Of course, that disparity is perhaps for another day, but nonetheless, with a reduction in funding for the presentation of a season, and certainly no local hirers or touring artists able to access the venue during these times, it is incredibly difficult. Working against a backdrop, we are the only state, other than Victoria, that currently is operating at less than 50% occupancy. The only state, other than Victoria, that is not at 50% occupancy in terms of theatres. In fact, other states are moving towards 100% occupancy before Christmas. And in the last 4 weeks, you will have read and heard that Events Tasmania and the government have been doing some work in this space. I'm not sure what they were doing before the last 4 weeks, but in any case, we are now seeing that the theatre will be able to open on December 1 with 50% occupancy, less the number of people required to meet the 2 metre rule, less the performers on stage, less the ushers, less the technicians. So occupancy will be still less than 400, and that is still a challenge in terms of the viability of events and performances, which in turn means a reduction in box office fees, hire fees and on costs from hirers. I think this is sensible. I think it's sensible to include it into our COVID response package that has been provided to a variety of things in the City of Launceston and a variety of areas. And I think it's really important to note that even though the subsidy is for the organisation that is managing the space, that these are our assets, and they are assets that are managed very well and for the benefit of our community.
Thank you. Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, it feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it, that the city was completely full because there was a sold-out performance on at the Prinny and something that I can't wait to see again. But I think Theatre North have always been very careful managers, they've been diligent managers, and I think they've always had a very healthy balance sheet. And I know that would be in some part due to the work that Councillor Mackenzie has done there over the years. So this, I hope, is a one-off. I always want to be fair in my judgments, and it, you know, any facility in the city could then come and ask for similar funding based on the fact that we've done this here today, and I assume that we will support this here today. But I do think Theatre North is a special case, and I do think it is worthy of our support because of the unique position they hold in our community. And in so many ways, it is the centre of our community. We've proven this fairly small community to have such a significant interest in art and culture, and Theatre North is one of those places where it's undertaken. So please support this today. We want to see a healthy, vibrant Theatre North moving into the future.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to? Councillor Walker?
Thank you, Mayor, and I won't reiterate what other councillors have said. I fully support those comments. Just suffices to say that the arts community, not just in Launceston or Tasmania, but Australia-wide, has suffered more so than some other sectors. Of course, you know, many different stories there, but I do support this funding and hope that it's a signal to the broader arts community that there is hope for the future, and I look forward to seeing what Theatre North do to bring that to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Mackenzie, wish to close?
I do, Mayor. I guess Theatre North is the auspice which manages the theatre, but it is our theatre, it is our asset that we're looking after, and I guess our choices are we look after it ourselves or we go and find somebody else to look after it. So the reality of it is that's our choices in regards to where we go in the longer term in regards to this. And just to take on Councillor Walker's, I think the arts are always the first to support a crisis by Live Aid and things like that around the world, around the country, and they've probably been the last to be supported in regards to a lot of things in regards to this crisis. So I'm disappointed that our response to the arts community hasn't been better than it has. This is our small way of supporting our organisation to continue to sort of provide the opportunity so that when we do get up and running again, the arts in Launceston and the surrounds will get up and going as quickly as we can.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. So 19.3 is now the budget for Theatre North. Deputy Mayor, seconded Councillor Mackenzie. Do you wish to speak to it, Deputy? Councillor Mackenzie? Speak to it? No. Any other councillor wish to speak to it? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. So 19.4, the 4-year delivery plan. Have someone happy to move that? Councillor Finlay, seconded Councillor Harris. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Finlay?
Yeah, I do, Mayor. Of all of the things to be excited about, I think this is really exciting. The path that this organisation has been on for a number of years and supported more intensely with what is not anymore a recent appointment of our General Manager, and the alignment across the organisation with all the things that we do strategically and operationally, and how we work together across our whole suite of documents to guide our region and the northern part of the state, and particularly our community within the city of Launceston, has never been more clear or more integrated than we find ourselves with today, with a 4-year delivery plan. When you go through the plan, I really love the fact that it explains where it fits, what it delivers and what its purpose is. But for anybody that gets excited about these sorts of things and has a look at it and reads it, they'll also see so much more about our organisation and our community in terms of our priorities, what the focuses are, what we're expecting to do, what sort of role we play in it, who's responsible for it, you know, over what period of time in that 4 years we're looking for it to be rolled out. I don't think we've ever known as an organisation exactly where we're at as clearly as we do today. I highly recommend people to look at it, to regard it and to interrogate and keep us to account to it. And I look forward to working with the organisation through the CEO to deliver it.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you very much. Not much more to say to those wonderful words from Councillor Finlay, other than I remember a boss of mine saying failure to plan is to plan to fail, and clearly the council is not intending to fail. I'm a bit surprised, other than the fact it's the inaugural 4-year plan. Having only been here for 2 years, I would have thought that 4-year plans would have been a forward part of council planning in the past, but obviously not. So it's good to see it's in there, and yeah, it gives us all a good roadmap of where we're going. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Mayor. And just to reiterate the 4-year roadmap, and I think there's something that the CEO brought to this council. I guess the reality of it is we've planned, but the plans just rolled on and on and on. So when a new group of councillors came in, they effectively adopted or effectively inherited the plans of the previous council. So I think the good thing about it, I mean, there are things that do continue on beyond each council period, but I think it's important that we as a group actually have something that we actually stand for during that 4-year period. And I think this 4-year plan said this is what we're going to contribute to the community over that 4-year period. We get a chance to actually say what it is that we want to be and see as the important things over that period, and that gets put into it. You know, and along with the things which are 10, 20, 30 years facing in regards to which are sort of business as usual type stuff. But I think it's really important that we do have these plans, and I just sort of really commend the CEO for bringing this to the council, and I commend this to anybody who'd like to read it, because it does make exciting reading, Councillor Finlay.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Finlay wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. So 19.5, City of Launceston Annual Plan. Councillor Mackenzie moved. Councillor Finlay seconded. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Mackenzie?
Look, there's a lot of there's a lot written in there, and I think it's just behoves people to read through there. And again, the various levels of completion have various reasons why they've got to where they've got to, and I think there are explanations in there. And I just challenge anybody who wants further deliberation to sort of just prod through further those and ask further questions about them, because we have priorities, we're working through them. COVID has had its impact on it. Our priorities get slightly changed just by circumstances from time to time. The fact that we might need further information to enable us to progress things the way we want to do. But I think that it's a good plan to have in front of us, and it's just a matter of making sure that we don't put in our annual plan things that we don't think we're going to do. So it's a matter, I think we had this conversation a few years ago, of making sure that our plans are achievable.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay. Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. So 19.6, proposed closure of Frederick Street, part of. Someone happy to move that? Councillor. Sorry, move Councillor Finlay. Yeah, first. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mackenzie. Question, Councillor Finlay? Sorry? No.
I read and reread this, and I'm comfortable with the intention. What I'm not clear on, unless I missed something, is what I regularly see people walk up and down that part to get to school and things. I'm just not sure how wide is being left. It tells you how wide the road reserve is, but does it tell you how wide a footpath pavement will be left?
Who's there to answer that?
Or is there footpath pavement?
There will be a footpath up along Frederick Street, along the opposite side, which will remain unaffected. It doesn't appear that the part of the highway that will be closed is being used as a walkway by the public, given that it's very rocky and uneven and difficult to maintain. So it doesn't appear that access will be affected in any way as part of the closure.
Thank you, Robert. Councillor Mackenzie. Oh, do you want to speak first, Councillor Finlay?
I'm just going to hold that for a minute.
Hold it, okay. Councillor Mackenzie.
This is I guess, a procedure where we've looked at our roadways. Somebody's requested to, I think, acquire the property, I think, from memory. And we've then assessed whether we really need, we've had there as a road reserve for a number of years. The outlook of it is rocky and I guess the assessment's been made by council that we don't have a future use for that, and therefore it makes sense for that property to now move out of our hands and into private land owners. Somebody else can look after it.
Thank you. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Walker.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I've struggled with this a little, and I'll give the reasons why. It's eminently understandable why a landowner next adjacent to a plot of land like this would look at it and think, well, that's not being used, and I can make better use of that. It's true that the council does spend time maintaining these types of lots around the city. But it's also true that these particular lots do provide amenity to our town. In this case, it's only a green space. It's got a couple of trees. I remember years ago there used to be a giant apple tree at the top of Frederick Street there as well, and I used to go up and pick apples when I was a little bit younger. That's gone in the meantime. I lamented that disappearing, and I would lament areas like this disappearing around Launceston. Now, in this case, you might say, oh yes, but this is going to save the council some money. Nobody uses this land, and it's true. If you go and have a look at it, it's not easy to. You're not going to choose to walk there, and there is a walkway on the other side. But I think it sets up for me an uncomfortable precedent, which is landowners all around Launceston looking at their nature strip, saying, well, that bit of land's not being used. It was designated for something else. I might have a go at purchasing that and adding it to my property. Understandable if you're the property owner, but problematic in terms of the precedent that it sets. I'm sure it's been done before. I'm sure it'll happen again. But like I say, I do have those concerns. It does contribute to the streetscape. It might be only a subtle contribution. It might be a subconscious contribution in a way. But if I imagine that area with becoming private land and then potentially even having a DA applied to put on it, all of a sudden it starts to become more problematic. So I'm having difficulty at this stage seeing how I'll support this particular proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? Councillor Mackenzie has a question.
The land isn't owned by the city, I don't understand. We only have a road reserve, so all we're doing is giving up our road reserve. Is that correct?
Thank you. Right.
Yes, correct. It's owned by the Crown and the landowner is dealing with the Crown regarding the purchase.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay, do you wish to speak? No. No other councillors? Do you want to close, Councillor Finlay? No. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? So that's 2 against, the rest are 4. That is carried. Move on to 19.7. Move, Deputy Mayor, that was quick. Thank you. Councillor Finlay was a second? No? No? Oh, did? No, sorry. Seconded by Councillor Mackenzie. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. This is, I think, a reflection of the way that our council continues to support community and the way that we are a responsive organisation that will do what it can to work with community when perhaps things are identified that haven't been previously brought to the organisation's attention. And I know that there will be some not-for-profit groups, one in particular that will be listening to today's meeting. I want to thank Nathan for his work in reviewing this policy, because the introduction of the new fee, the community regular per hour fee, is appropriate for those not-for-profit organisations that use our halls in order to undertake provision of services that better our community. Things such as meet and greets, things such as play groups, things such as sport and recreational opportunities that are undertaken by not-for-profit groups versus commercial entities. And as is identified through the definition, the not-for-profit is very clear, as is the definition between those that are regular and those that are one-off. So I commend the recommendation to the table.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
I think it just shows we're listening and learning and responding.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Thanks, Mayor. Just one question about when we lease these places out. We had a problem out at Launceston where we leased out the hall and it was damaged. Can we put something in place where we've got a large bond off a credit card if we get these places damaged?
Thank you. So Nathan, you want to answer that, or?
We definitely can look at doing that. So the fees and charges for next financial year are being looked at the moment by council officers, so we can certainly look at implementing a larger bond to mitigate some of that damage.
Yeah, I think we need to do that just to protect ourselves a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor wish to speak? Ask a question? Deputy Mayor wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. 19.8, the Cataract Gorge. Now I believe there's a change just in the spelling on this one. So we get it right on the screen, just people know that we've got... Our apologies to the spelling of defender. Sorry? Defender, I know how you pronounce it. That's Defendera, that's right. So Councillor Walker moved, seconded Councillor Harris. Wish to speak to Councillor Walker?
Yes, just briefly, thank you, Mayor, and apologies to Don Defendurfer, who did appear in our minutes, in our agenda as a defender, but he may well be a defender of the Cataract Gorge. Yes, I do rise to welcome new committee members, Ms Anna Povey, Dr John Ralph and Mr Don Defendurfer, who is an ongoing member of the committee. He's returning. I do note that there is still one community representative position vacant. I'm not sure of the exact procedure if that was to be filled or if someone was to be interested in filling that. But nonetheless, the Cataract Gorge committee will be meeting this time in a week's time, and look forward to welcoming those people to the committee.
Thank you. Councillor Harris, any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. That's the end of the program. So we get to the an item on moving to closed council. Move Councillor Sowers, seconded Councillor Harris. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors present. So we're now going to closed council.
Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is
recommendation that we endorse the decision, or where it is it? There, it's up. up on screen now, is it? Wait a minute, sorry. I just want to make sure it's on screen. It's on the screen, the closed decision and special council meeting. Those meetings were approved, and then we discussed the Chief Executive Officer's performance review, moved by Councillor Soward and seconded by Councillor Cox. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. Thank you, and we close the meeting.
Going to say something.